Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crilley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw a rose. Now, you know I've been on YouTube for a very long time. I've done hundreds of videos, but I've never done any video on how to draw a flower or really a plant of any kind. So we're kind of hopefully breaking new ground here today. And I'm going to begin by drawing just a very loose outline of where I intend to draw the rose. I can't have any of this be final lines because I'm going to kind of figure this out later on as I work my way outward toward the outermost petals after I've figured out the kind of details of the core interior section. So let's just consider this the amorphous blob that it appears to be. Now, at this stage, I want to begin deciding where is the sort of central core of this rose. And, you know, roses at different points in their blooming cycle have vastly different shapes. I've decided to have one that is sort of midway through. It's got a little bit of that tight core, which I'm drawing here. It almost looks like one of those safety cones, you know, that you see on the street sometimes when they're doing construction. And this is going to help me figure out where the center of the rose is. And having decided that, then I'm going to decide how the petals will wrap one across the other. Hopefully you can see this. Hang on, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Okay, so this will help you to see the details a little better. So you can see this one is wrapping in front of the other, almost like a robe or a kimono, let's say, with one petal folding in front of the other, and kind of deciding which way that's going to go is helpful at the start, because you are going to begin to repeat it. Like, for example, I might go into this interior and have the same thing kind of happen again until we get to this very tightly packed area of petals at the center where you can't really sort of see the structure anymore. But as we go along, I'm going to continue, like here, I'm going to have a next petal sort of fold around like so. And as we get out from that interior core, you may find that the petal folds out a bit. You can sort of see the interior of the petal folding, curving over, so that you see the edge of it. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. Probably not. But I'm going to come over here and have another one of these petals that curves around and sort of folds over just a little bit so that you can see the interior of it as it loops around. And then what I do when I'm drawing a rose is just to sort of continue working outwards like that. So let's say we've established this sort of robe-like fold, not fold, but one passing in front of the other. I'm going to come over here and sort of repeat that over here, but each time I get further away from that tightly packed area, I feel like the petals, you know, loosen up more and more and begin to sort of breathe a little bit. You know, they're not so tightly wrapped. But I do think it's helpful to establish this pattern of, you know, one folding or passing in front of the other, and then you can kind of repeat that as you go. Now, I had the idea initially of trying to do all of this beginning line work real time. I don't know if I'm going to hold to that. It could get a little bit dull, but I think you get the basic idea of how I'm doing this. How about if we kick it into time-lapse for just a little bit as I move outward towards these petals that are furthest away from the center, and I think those probably I will do in real time and talk a little more about how the shape of those petals is quite different from these interior petals. So let's go ahead and do a little time-lapse, and I will be right back. Alright, so we're getting closer to these final petals that are at the very edge of the rose, and at this stage you may find yourself sort of playing around with the shape, trying to figure out what is an elegant shape for each petal. You know, of course, studying photographs and so forth is the key, or an actual rose, even better. Have one. Why not buy yourself a rose that you can use to practice and sort of figure what shapes are possible with these exterior petals. I find that what happens as I studied photos and so forth is that the petals way out here on the exterior are almost getting kind of loose and floppy, and as they sort of fold around toward in on themselves almost, you'll get these little sharp points where, like right here, where two different sides are sort of curving in towards each other and they come to a peak. But I find that you almost get into a realm of abstract art here as you begin to work on these exterior petals. And you can maybe be a little bit free to invent your own shapes and just find what looks good to you. You know, like I'm just sort of kind of playing around right now with trying to give this petal a little bit of depth, you know, like, and I'm going to shade, I'm going to start adding a little bit of shading in a minute that I think will also help us to see the structure. But like something like this is just kind of bothering my eye. I feel like, well, it might look a little better if I tuck that in a little further. A lot of this stuff becomes a matter of artistic instinct almost, and your eye begins to tell you which lines you want to change and so forth. And of course practice, you know, over time. I cannot claim to be an expert at drawing roses. I haven't spent the last, whatever, 10 or 15 years drawing roses, but I've drawn them every once in a while. I have had requests from people for drawings of roses or different types of flowers, so I thought, why not? Why not take on the challenge? And if I had been thinking, I would have done this around the time of Valentine's Day. That'd have been the smart thing to do. But not me. I'm doing it in June. And I'm going to do one last petal down here, and I think that's going to be it for my rose. As you get to the very final petals, depending again on the sort of blooming, the stage of blooming, you may get some imperfections in the petal. I mean, not such a smooth, clean contour. But you're not going to see that in the interior here. This is where it gets very tightly packed, and there's a sort of a perfection about the petals in this very interior area. I'm going to go ahead and drop quickly in a sort of indication of a stem. I'm not going to devote too much of this video to drawing the stem, but of course it needs to have thorns. Can't be a rose without thorns. And just to kind of complete the look, I think I'm going to add a leaf coming off here. And the leaves of most roses, I believe, have a sort of a jagged edge to them. So once you've got the basic shape of your leaf in place, you'll want to sort of create a zigzagging edge to make it look like a rose leaf. Although there may be, almost certainly are different varieties that have different shapes and different levels of zigzagginess to them. In any case, I did want to show how adding a bit of shading, like if I decide that the light source is from the upper left, and I begin to put in just a little bit of light shading, this can help us to understand the structure of the rose. So all of these petals here that are a little, you know, turned away from the light source are going to get some shading. And I am going to do this full color. I'm going to do most of that in time-lapse, but knowing the light source is going to help you a lot in terms of adding a believable look, a sort of three-dimensionality to this rose, as you begin to understand where is the light unable to reach. Like I would say over here, we're going to get quite a lot of shade. Maybe a little cast by one of the petals upon the other. And so yeah, you can see that even now, just adding a little bit of shading in these interior areas where the light can't reach is going to go a long way towards conveying the structure of the rose to anyone who views your drawing. So yeah, my pattern would be to figure out the basic line work first and then come in and start adding shading. Now I'm doing this very quickly here, but you're going to see me come back in with a marker and try to do a better job of really conveying the light and shadow. And speaking of which, why don't I go ahead and do that? Now, some people might be surprised that I'm going to go ahead and go in with marker while there's so much pencil here. And indeed, if you want a really pristine illustration of a rose, then you would want to maybe erase away much more of this line work. That is to say, if you intend to add color. I am going to sort of lighten it up just a bit, because all of this pencil would sort of mix with the marker and muddy things up, you know. The graphite begins to mix with the ink of your marker and you get this impure color. I'm not going to go crazy with erasing every last trace of it though. And at this stage I am going to come in here and, you know, my idea is not to worry too much about the individual petals in terms of, you know, coloring them each one separately from the other. I think what I'm doing right here is just getting a basic, a base layer of color, which will be built on top of with colored pencil. So you can see there's no big technique here, just adding a base color of pink. I've decided to make my rose pink. So let's go ahead and do all of this base layer of marker in time-lapse, and then I'll be back to do a little bit of more fine-tuned coloring with a colored pencil. Alright, so I did, you know, I got the base layer, and then you could see I started to work back in. I thought I'd come and talk about this just a bit. I'm doing almost a secondary layer, going in with the marker, moving the marker rather slowly across the surface, and that's my technique for getting two different shades out of the same marker. If you move the marker really quickly, you get a fairly light pink. When you go in the second time and you sort of slow down, you are depositing more of the ink onto the page, and you can get a sort of a second darker shade of the same color out of a single marker. At least that I have found that works for me. And so there you see me going in with this second, and even just alone with this marker, without having used any other coloring tool, we're already getting a more three-dimensional look to this rose. But what I want to do, and I think I'll do it right now, hang on a second, I think we need just a little more shading right there, is to pull out a colored pencil. This is a Prismacolor, and Prismacolor makes two different types of their pencil. This is the very thin, and it's very sort of hard lead that allows you to push down and get very precise coloring. The other sort of standard Prismacolor pencil, which is a little wider, I mean the pencil itself is perfectly round. This one has a sort of octagonal shape to it, if you're trying to differentiate them. Those ones are softer, though. The round ones that I think of as sort of the standard Prismacolor pencils have a softer kind of lead to them, and they come off onto the page more easily, but then they are maybe a little less precise when you're trying to get sharp lines and details and so forth. Anyway, I thought for doing a rose, because of the intricacy, is that a word? Of all these petals, that the very thin colored pencil was the way to go. So you can see me just going in here, and all of these areas where I would imagine the light cannot reach, I'm adding in this darker areas of color. And maybe that's going to be it for this. I might choose to come in with just a little hint of white pencil to add highlights. Maybe that'll be the last thing I do. I'm going to go ahead and color in the leaf. I'm not going to make this a lesson about drawing leaves. But who knows? Maybe next time. But I will be back. I'm going to do just that last little bit about the white, using a white colored pencil to add highlights, and that will probably be it for this video. So hang on just a second. I'm going to wrap this up, this coloring stage, and I'll be right back. Alright, so you can see I did quite a lot of shading, and I brought in an even darker shade of super dark red to deepen the shadows, and I think that goes a long way towards adding depth, just replicating the real play of light that you would see upon a rose. And I think that's part of why humans gravitate towards roses, is that when the light hits that intricate pattern, it just creates this incredibly beautiful complexity that you feel like you could just sit there and study, and then I also grabbed a darker green pencil to add a little more to the leaf. But what I want to do right now is bring out a white colored pencil, and this is what I was talking about before, what I called the sort of standard or premier Prismacolor, as a white pencil, a little softer, maybe not as precise, but at least it comes off onto the page very easily, and this is going to allow me to start adding little white highlights to these areas, anywhere where the light coming from the upper left here, anywhere that it would hit, I can sort of go in and add just a little bit of extra whiteness, and that is going to add yet another bit of three-dimensionality to it. You go dark and then you go a little bit lighter, and those things work together to really make it pop. And you can see hopefully this happening already, that what already looked fairly three-dimensional is going even further in the direction of creating that illusion of an actual rose, of what you see when there's a real rose in front of you. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to go ahead and finish this off also very quickly in time-lapse, and I'll be back with a few final words. So you can see what a difference these little touches of white make. Highly recommend getting yourself a white-colored pencil if you want to do illustrations like this. And please let me know what you thought of this video. If you enjoyed it, I could do more videos about drawing flowers and adding color to the illustrations. I had a lot of fun doing it. But for now, let me go ahead and say thank you to anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, like the Realism Challenge. This one has a illustration of a rose in it. I put a few more hours into that one, I must confess. The Drawing Lesson, a graphic novel that teaches you how to draw, and my very latest book, Chibi, my guide on how to draw in the Chibi style. But let's go ahead and lay down this pencil. I want to say thanks to everyone who watched this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.